What is up, guys? Fadeaway82 coming at you with the second edition of Rust Tactics, in which we take a look at player skirmishes and interactions on the US Rustopia server, and we talk about best practices, what players are doing best, what they could be doing differently, and talk about group dynamics, strategy, things of that nature. This footage is, for all intents and purposes, a raid cam, but I thought it fit better into the Rust Tactics series rather than necessarily a raid cam series. So what you're taking a look at right now are two groups that have come together. This is the NS group and the Aliens group. They've come together to raid a very large compound, which is Dirt, McGirt, and crew. They have put a forward operating base, which are also referred to as raid bases or staging bases, up here on the top of a mountain peak in the winter biome, which is something that you guys always want to go ahead and do, are building those raid bases and those staging bases. We'll talk more about that as this video progresses. As the members move out, you'll notice that initially 2 members went out as a scouting party, and the group itself is following in hot pursuit of that scouting party. But it's always good to send out a couple scouts if you can, just to kind of pave the way and to be able to give the rest of the group some more information. Now, with the size of the compound they're going to be raiding, which is an absolutely massive desert city that Dirt built out here, hopefully they've scoped it out ahead of time. There are many layers to this base. There's quarries that are sectioned off from the main base itself, and then there's many towers, many flank towers inside that compound. So if they're thinking about raiding this, it's going to take a lot of precision and a lot of skill and a lot of planning. And the first shots have been fired, so the element of surprise has been lost here. DMG likely had a heads up on this one. Global chat was lighting up when this raid team started to roll out. When you have that many members rolling deep, even though they're sort of color coordinated and they blend in with the landscape as they were in that grassy biome there, it's still easy to spot that amount of players moving in. On a server that's as populated as Rustopia, it's hard to keep things a secret. So you'll notice here, guys, some of the things you want to take note of in terms of best defenses is that Dirt has structured here flank towers around the compound, which gives him that vantage point inside the compound and then also outside the compound. So he can see the positions of the raid team as they move in. With regard to the raid team, their best practices that they're using is they're using the natural formation at landscape to their advantage. They're sticking behind rocks. They're also sticking behind structures that Dirt has already built, which are those tool cabinets that are in those auxiliary buildings there. You'll notice Dirt and his crew are not taking the fight outside the compound. At this point in time, they're assessing the scope of the raid team here and trying to figure out their next move. They're staying to the towers, which is exactly what you want to go ahead and do here. The raid team is building a secondary forward operating base or raid base there, and that is a good practice because they want to have supplies closer to the fight so that they can re-gear and get in that battle quicker. That mountaintop forward operating base, the first one they built, was a very good one to put because it's far enough away from the base where Dirt and his crew aren't going to be able to spot that being built, but it's also far enough away where it's hard to run back and get in the fight quickly. So it's good to have 2 forward operating bases here. You'll notice the members here are working hard to get that up in the heat of the battle. Something here you guys can do to be able to have it go a little bit quicker is have one person using the building plan to place the structures down, and have the other person with the hammer and supplies ready to go ahead and upgrade it. So work in succession if you guys can with that, and sort of work in a team if you're able to do that. That's how you can get those bases up quicker than you can with just one person doing all of the sort of construction while the other person's guarding. Notice here again just the layout of Dirt's compound. This is just a brief glimpse of it. You'll see more of it in the Rustopia cribs, but lots of spaces there for him to sort of hide and have a good vantage point. Notice the high perimeter stone walls here, which are both used by Dirt and the Raiders. So the Raiders have put down the high perimeter stone walls which they're able to hide behind, and Dirt has many of those spread out as well. This is Pharaoh. He has taken the fight outside the compound, along with Marshall, has a death wish from Dirt's crew. And Pharaoh, as people know from Rustopia, he's no one to be messed with, and he's quite a good shot. He's pretty much the Beach Hills of Rustopia when Beach Hills isn't playing on Rustopia. But you'll notice here that Dirt's taking the fight out here. He's shredding through people. He's doing a damn fine job. I'm sorry, Pharaoh's coming out here. He's doing a damn fine job, and he's using those high stone exterior walls to the best of his ability. He's using them for cover, and he does go down here in a moment, but he's probably taken out at least 4 or 5 members of the raid party. But more important than that, Pharaoh's been able to get a sense of where that forward operating base is. So the new forward operating base that's being built here, Pharaoh has spotted it. Now, Dirt and his crew may have been able to see that from their compound because their towers were so high. There's a very good chance that from a tower such as this one, they were able to actually spot that being built. But if not, rest assured that Pharaoh laid his eyes on it, and he'll be able to call out that target to other team members as they roll out and take the fight to the raid team on the ground. And here's where the battle begins to take a bit of a turn. You'll notice that DMG is using the high ground to their advantage, and they're attempting to flank and descend upon this raid base or forward operating base down here. They're using the high ground to their advantage and using those high exterior stone walls to be able to lay fire down into that lower placed forward operating base. Now, talking about real life strategy, guys, we all know in military tactics, if you build a base down in a valley, you're going to be prone to attack. And if you use the high ground to your advantage, you're probably going to have sort of a tactical advantage that you can see what's going on and sort of pick and choose your shots. So talking about where the Raiders built this forward operating base, I'm not sure what their mindset was when doing it. They may have thought that it was more hidden because it was taking sort of the lower ground and was hidden by some of the structures that were already placed. But by doing that, they've opened themselves up to being able to be attacked from the high ground here. Now, it's interesting to see here because you can see that there's lines of sight that go directly into this forward operating base. Now, granted, that's not completed. If it had been completed, it would be less prone to this, but because Dirt and his crew used speed and aggression to their favor, they rushed out here to this forward operating base and took the fight to it. They're able to attack those members there while it's still under construction, which makes them very vulnerable. They may not even have had a chance to place down sleeping bags there. I'm not quite sure at this point. But you notice a lot of gunfire going on here, and this is something, guys, that we see a lot in raids. You'll notice when raids start, a lot of the defenders will stick to their base, which is always a good practice, but sometimes it works in your favor to have speed and aggression, go out there, take the fight to the raiders. And when the defenders can do that, if they can get a party out there and gear them up with enough explosives or rockets to be able to take out a forward operating base, whether it's a primary one or a secondary one like this, it can really turn the tides of the raid, and it can really have an impact on the overall battle. Another point to point out here, guys, is notice that when the raiders are fighting and also the defenders, they're placing down the wood perimeter walls or the stone walls. So any type of barricade they can place down and be able to gain cover is a very good thing to do. In the next patch that's going to be coming out, sandbags will be a more effective means to do this, but this is just like the way it was back in the days of Legacy, when you throw down those wood barricades and be able to very quickly deploy them and use them as sort of an offensive measure and a defensive measure. And that's really what you're seeing here. That's really a good tactic to use, whether it's just a PvP skirmish or a raid itself. Notice here that because that raid base was still under construction, it wasn't able to be airlocked fully, so the front door is missing, and that is a difficult position for the raiders to be in because they only have one door that's a barrier between them and the defenders. So at this point in time, the raid has sort of switched from the raiders raiding the defenders to the defenders kind of raiding this small little raid base here. Now, I'm not sure, guys, what's going on here because there was a massive raid team that we saw earlier on. And while I'm filming just at this point this one little slice of life here, the main compound wasn't being attacked. So even though we saw this massive raid team being formed in the first part of the video, I don't know where they all are. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but they're certainly not taking the fight to the compound. And these members here are a squad of about 6 men, it looks like, from the top and bottom floors. And they're now sort of at the disadvantage. So now we see some gunfire coming from the mountain ridge up there, which is where that primary forward operating base is. So we might be seeing some more of the raid team coming down to try to flank the DMG members who are out here attempting to overtake that secondary forward operating base. Again, here you'll notice that DMG is using that high ground to their advantage, raining fire back down into that forward operating base. There is some crossfire going back up into the hills, but it looks like for the most part that has subsided, and DMG's taking the fight back down to this forward operating base here. They've now breached the door and they're making their way in. Notice as soon as the door was open, a rocket was fired in there to sort of pave the way, which helps clear out sleeping bags, which are spawn points, and helps to clear out any members who are in there. There's still 2 members down here on the ground floor, and they are attempting to hold off the defenders at this point as best they can, even though they have themselves become the defenders. They've just been taken out with what looks like another rocket as the DMG squad moves in here, and they're beginning to sort of overtake this secondary forward operating base. This is a critical point, guys, because this is something that the raiders have expended a lot of resources and energy on. So this is a bit of a turning point here. I don't see a lot of loot crates in here, so it looks like their main loot, their primary loot, is still up at that main forward operating base. So the question, I guess, that is in my mind right now, and that I don't have an answer for, is did the main raid team say fuck it at this point and move back out with the loot that they had at that primary forward operating base, because when you build these forward operating bases, they're full of loot. They're like small bases that are high yield, if you will. And there's rockets, C4, lots of ammo, lots of kits, things like that to be able to go ahead and keep, coming back to the fight. So as the last member falls here in that secondary forward operating base, we are zooming back up to that primary forward operating base. We're noticing here still lots of loot crates and sleeping bags here. There's some members in there, but they're not that well geared. So they're naked, they don't have pants on, and this leads me to believe that most likely they took the lion's share of their loot and headed back out because the raid wasn't going in their favor, or so they thought, and they believed that they better cut their losses and take what they had back to their main base. Now, talking about this, guys, this is using, talks about using speed and aggression here is really the theme of this Rust Tactics video. So what do I mean by speed and aggression? I mean, it can be used on both sides here. So when you're raiding a base, if you keep pushing through, if you keep hammering it with rockets, C4, lots of explosions, lots of stuff going off, it's hard for the defenders to be able to really focus on what's going on. If you have a squad of the size that we saw in the beginning of this raid camp or Rust Tactics video here, you could break into multiple fire teams and move in from 4 different points on that compound, and it would be very hard then for the defenders to be able to take the fight back out to the raiders. So somehow there was, in my mind, a miscommunication here among the raiders, and at that point Dirt and his crew were able to sort of take advantage of that small window and come back out and take the fight to the ground, which caused the raid team to, instead of keep pushing forward, retreat. At this point in time, what you guys are seeing footage of is Dirt and his crew overtaking the primary forward operating base here. And again, there are loot crates in there, but my best guess is that because this is not being heavily defended, it's probably relatively empty, and most of the stuff that is valuable has been trucked back to the main base of Aliens and NS. And there's still some gunfire going on here at this primary forward operating base up on this snowy peak. Notice here, guys, probably what's going on, I believe, is that the defenders who are staying here, now the defenders are actually the raiders and vice, the roles have changed here. But the people who are defending this forward operating base, in my mind, are probably doing this not so much to salvage what's in there, but to distract DMG and his crew from going after the main group, which is already rolled out and probably has a lot of supplies on them. They're trying to get it back to their compound. So as night falls here, DMG has this position locked down, and we're fast forwarding here. As morning approaches, a secondary squad from DMG is moving up towards that forward operating base, and at this point in time, they're going to go ahead and they're going to breach that fob because they want to see what's in there, and they also want to take away those spawn points. So you'll notice as they move into position here, they are softening up the door with a rocket launcher that kind of mitigates how much C4 they have to use. They can then use less charges because the rocket's done some damage on the door. So these get a combination of rockets and C4 to be able to breach through the doorway here. Notice that that forward operating base was airlocked, which you guys always want to go ahead and do because it's very critical to be able to do that. You don't want to ever have just one door separating you from the savages outside in Rust. Now, also, guys, something to talk about is forward operating bases have changed a little bit in the way that they're structured now. They can actually be made in a much quicker fashion, and they don't have to be as carefully laid out because of those high exterior stone walls. So notice that this one was sort of wrapped in high exterior stone walls except for that entryway, which is something that is really an effective way to put a fob up on sort of the fly and not have to build something that's going to be really honeycombed or really have to use a lot of resources. So those high exterior stone walls have really been a game changer for the game overall, but in particular when it comes to creating these forward operating bases, raid bases, staging bases, whatever you want to call it. So what you guys are seeing right now is the DMG squad, which has moved up here. They are taking out those spawn points, which are the sleeping bags. They're taking out the corpses that are in here, or the sleepers rather, that were in there. And they're putting up a sign here to indicate that they have now claimed this forward operating base as their own. This is something that is often done as a way to put their own sort of brand on it. It sort of sends a message to the team and is a bit of pride for the crew. So you'll notice that when raiders raid a base, they'll often do this, and by modifying someone's signs, it's often viewed as a sign of disrespect, and it's something that people take very seriously. A lot of effort goes into building a lot of these signs, and it's really something that is interesting to see that dynamic sort of come into play. So guys, we're going to go ahead and we're going to end this. I really hope you enjoy this new series called Rust Tactics, in which we take a look at player skirmishes, group dynamics, what to do, what not to do on the US Rustopia server. As always, guys, I really hope you enjoyed it. Had a lot of fun watching this and being able to put this video together for you. As always, Fado82, peace.